Hello everybody and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you're doing well, and today we'll be doing a box office breakdown for this past weekend, which saw the release of Black Panther Wakanda Forever, as it says from Deadline, roaring to $330 million global start. One big problem, of course, that's about 20 to 30 million less than what had been projected. Now, that does not mean that the film is doing poorly or that the film is going to be a flop. In fact, quite the contrary, I would say that these numbers very much show that the chance of this film making its money back quite easily in the next few weeks is most likely to happen. However, it is, I think, important for us to look at the numbers to get a better idea and grasp over where this film likely will end by the end of its run. Even though it's only been one weekend, we can still, already early on, basing this and comparing this to other films, not just from the MCU, but also other films from the last year, that have opened in similar amounts or similar to somewhat this amount of money, how they did and how they fared by the end of their run as well, and some of the reasons as to why those films did the numbers that they did. But before we get any further, though, please make sure that you smash that like button, slap that fire button if you're watching over on Odyssey, smash the rumble button as well. It really does help out a lot. Also, make sure that you are subscribed to the channel with the bell notification turned on. That way you know every time a video or live stream goes live on the channel. I don't know why I can't say bell notification in that sentence. It's the weirdest thing every single time. Anyway, as it says from Deadline, right, opening up to $330 million worldwide with $150 million from the overseas market, $180 from the domestic. So it's important for us first to note that $180 million number that they're talking about domestically is very much on par with where they thought the film was going to be by the end of the weekend, right? The high-end estimate was $200 million, but the range was somewhere between the $170, $175, and $200. And so that means that this film right now is going on pace, is expected to perform about as well as expected domestically. Of course, have to wait for the week 2 numbers because that's going to be the biggest tell of where this film ends up by the end of the run, right? You had Box Office Pro saying the film likely to end somewhere around $500 million domestically by the end of the run. I think that's very much a possibility still at this point. This is something that I've been saying for months. I said do not sleep on the domestic numbers for this movie because even though right now there is some mixed reactions to the movie, if you actually look to some of the most, some of the official box office tracking and some of the official audience tracking, most of the word of mouth has been pretty positive. Post-Track has positive numbers coming from it. Of course, you have the Rotten Tomatoes numbers. Some have said, well, if you look at the total number, it's a lot less than the, quote, verified number. But even at around 80 to 85% positive, that's still positive enough for us to say, okay, MCU stans, they're going to love this film because they're MCU stans. But it seems that there's at least a portion of the domestic audience, of the normies, that are enjoying this film too. And I imagine that a lot of that has to do with how much they give as far as the praise to Chadwick Boseman. I think it's actually quite small in the comparison to the rest of the film, right? It's over 2.5 hours, and you have, maybe a total of 10 minutes, if even that, of anything that could be seen as a tribute to Chadwick Boseman. So I think that that is definitely not something that is accurate. If anyone's going to say, "Oh, go see this because it's a beautiful love letter to Chadwick Boseman," it's not. It's not a love letter to him. It's not a love letter to Black Panther. Black Panther itself is not even, is barely even in the movie. And also just doesn't make any darn sense with how they even get to that point either. And it just causes a lot of, I think, problems story-wise. The film is just a giant bore. And I think that 2.5 hour total is probably going to cause the film to have some bigger problems down the road, because as the film gets further and further out from its opening weekend, the chances of people randomly just going to the theater and saying, oh, what do I want to go see, or what do I have time to go see, less likely to see a 2.5 hour film versus some of the other movies that might be out. The film does not have a lot of competition, so that will definitely be a big help in the first few weeks where, again, it's the most important time for a movie, the first 2 weeks most especially, as that usually accounts for at least half of the entire number that it makes if it has very good legs. If it doesn't, then it can account for upwards of 70% of the entire box office total. And so, with that in mind, if this $330 million is just week 1, and we're likely to get to $500 million by the end of week 2, we're looking at the film getting somewhere between $700 and $900 million worldwide by the end of its run. Again, very early estimate, and that's just based off of where other films with similar openings have opened, and also whether or not it is, again, going to fall in that 50% range compared to its first 2 weeks, meaning it doubling the first 2 weeks. I just don't think that's going to be likely based off of some of the numbers and some of the reactions that we're getting. and the fact that it's a very long film and not a very good film to boot. But again, audiences can be sometimes quite weird. Looking at the actual numbers domestically, let's starting off there. $180 million, meaning it's around $40,000 per theater, so a very strong per theater number there, coming out at over 4,300 screens. I also want to just point out that anyone anyone who's going to try and push conspiracy theories in the comments, please don't. Anyone going to try and say Disney's clearly buying tickets, just stop. There are people who are going to see this film, all right? I see the MCU stands in my comments all the time, so I know that these people actually exist. In addition, they're just regular, normal people who say, oh, I see that this has Black Panther in it, who don't follow the culture war, who don't follow anything going on behind the scenes, and probably have no idea about any of the potential quote-unquote drama that was going on with the character of Shuri, right? And the actress, maybe, or, Letitia Wright, maybe or maybe not having vax. I mean, they're not going to have any knowledge of that for the most part, right? That's a sad state of our culture and of our country, is that the vast majority of people are just unaware and are just very ignorant of this. And I think the midterms are a very clear example of that as well. But I digress. Black Panther Wakanda Forever is doing well at the box office domestically. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise, because that would just not be true. It's a false statement to say it's not doing well. And also, again, Disney's not buying tickets. There's been never shown proof of that. And if anyone's going to say, well, look, I found this one company that buys a bunch of tickets. Yeah, and I bet they do that for every single major release. So anyway, almost anything that you can come up with, there can be a very sensible response to. And this is coming from someone who gave this film like a D+, C-, maybe on a good day. Film was not good. Film was not good at all. I would not recommend anyone see it. It's a waste of time. It's a giant bore, and it's just not a very good story to boot. Anyway, Black Panther Forever, $180 million domestically getting the start. This also means some pretty bad news for Black Adam going forward. So the DCEU stands now are going to be mad at me as well. This film opening up to 8.6, or rather having fourth week numbers of 8.6, dropping 53%. As you can see, the film is obviously, we can confirm now based on the fact that we're not getting numbers from them, the film has not gotten a China release. And because the film's not gotten China release, its last chance of being able to make money has pretty much come and gone, right? They were originally projecting the film to get released in China. There was no confirmation from any side of whether it was going to happen or not. There was just rumors. Of course, now that we actually have the day itself and we have the data that's just not available, it tells us, okay, they clearly had that deal fall apart. Whether or not they're able to make a deal down the road or not is going to be anyone's guess. Regardless of it, even if the audience decided to show up, right? Even the Chinese audience decided to show up to go see this film, it would still have a long way to go. It still needs to make $500 million to break even. And so the reason why I say that it's, China wasn't even a guarantee, the fact that it's not there means any last chance effort that it had to be able to get pushed to that amount, just not going to happen. The film's not very good in addition to that, right? Pierce Brosnan's character is great, and I would say that this film is definitely a lot better than Black Panther as far as the fact that it's also just a lot shorter of a movie, probably more so because of that. Regardless, this number right here is very important for us to keep in mind, that this film is not likely going to make its money back and be another box office flop for Warner Brothers, and they need to really get a grip and rein on their spending. They're way overspending on their movies, have been for a very long time, and it just doesn't show on the screen, right? The amount of money, this is $200 million or so that they spent on this film, I just don't see what they could have possibly spent it on, because if anyone says visual effects, I've seen such better visual effects from companies and from movies that did so much less money, cost so much less money, that to me, that just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Anyway, Ticket to Paradise, that film that I still don't quite understand. I've seen some people in the comments explain some of it to me about it being a very traditional rom-com, and so people are drawn to it for that reason. Hey, good to hear that. Still don't really care much about this film at all, because I just don't really want to see a George Clooney film, just personally. Still doing very well, though. $6.1 million, a 29% drop from its third week, and so going to its fourth week, doing quite well there. It's actually been able to make its money back, so likely will be a bit of a profitable film for Universal. La La Crocodile, Sony Pictures dropped 5%. Remember, last weekend it had that bump, right? It actually increased the amount of money, which was very weird. I pointed out saying, this is going to be very weird. I'll be interested to see what the drop-off is after it. Only dropped 5%, so it lost 500 screens. Last weekend saw, a 10-15% increase in revenue, and only dropped 5% this week. So you're losing screens. You only lose 5% after an increased weekend. That's pretty impressive. So $3.2 million there. Is it going to be enough? I think it's a little bit too late for this movie, personally, but anything can happen at this point. It's about $30 million or so still in the red, which is the reason why I think it's a little bit too much to overcome. But hey, never say never, as they always say. It is doing well projections-wise compared to its first 2 weeks, but because it needed to make a little bit more because of a higher than what probably it should have cost budget and not doing as well internationally. This film still has a ways to go to make money back. Can't say the same thing for Smile, though. Smile has now officially crossed $100 million domestically. So at $2.3 million after 7 weeks of release, this film has made over $200 million worldwide, has made around $100 million in net gain profits. So, hey, kudos to them for wisely spending their money and for having a great marketing campaign because, hey, Paramount apparently knows how to sell their films and knows how to not spend as much money or, doesn't need to spend nearly as much money on films to be able to make films that with massive profits. I mean, keep in mind, Smile's profit and the profit margins from it are going to be higher than a lot of the MCU and big budget films this year. Because even though a lot of those films might have gotten to their break-even point, $100 million in net profit, we really can't say that has existed for a lot of those big budget films, especially from the superhero genre. So I think that's saying a lot right there. Coming in the number 6 spot is Pray for the Devil, dropping 48%, $2.2 million there. Still not getting any budgets reported for the movie, so can't say anything about it. Banshees of Inisherin, again, I still really want to see this film a second time to give a full-fledged review of it, dropping 17% in its 4th week of release, adding some theaters as well. So, again, don't know exactly how well that's doing as far as compared to a budget, because don't have that yet as a recording of this video, but again, I would say that it's a very well made movie. I don't think it's as funny as his other dark comedy, Martin McDonagh, who directed the film, who had also done In Bruges, which is a hilarious movie. Not nearly as funny as that, but still very, very, again, I think worth going to see. One Piece film Red, dropping 84% in its 2nd week of release because this film had already made a lot of money in its initial release in Japan. That kind of a drop-off really isn't that bad for it, but also no budget, so I can't say one way or the other how well or not well it's doing. I imagine it's quite small, so I imagine this film's probably seeing some pretty massive return on investment. Let's see. The United Artists film and independent release of Till, dropping 67% there, $8 million 5 weeks into its release. Again, no budget, so don't know what that is. Woman King still hanging around a little bit. It's guaranteed to flop at this point. Halloween Ends, made its money back, and then ticked off a bunch of fans, so good luck trying to relaunch that franchise anytime in the near future. Minion Rise of Gru is still around as well. Some numbers for Amsterdam and Barbarian, but none of those numbers have changed all that much. So let's go ahead now and actually dive into Black Panther. Let's have a discussion. All right, so Black Panther. $330 million worldwide is currently where this movie stands. It was expected to make $350. So it's already going in underneath where they had projected it to do worldwide. It is on pace, though, to do as well as they were projecting it to do domestically, right? Domestically, that $180 million is right in that range that they were expecting for the movie. Box Office Pro had the film making upwards of up to maybe $200 million, so it's not getting towards that higher range of things, but being in that middling range means that it's doing well enough. And because it's doing well enough, it means the chances of it getting to maybe $500 million domestically is actually a very likely scenario. If we see good drops from week 1 to week 2, which we will not know until next weekend. Keep this in mind. This film, right, is going to do well domestically. All right. This film, the first film in the franchise, made $700+ million domestically. That is, I think, a number people often forget. This movie's not going to get anywhere near that. This film is already underperforming compared to the original Black Panther by about $20 million. However, it is still going to be tracking, I think, enough to maybe get to the $500 million mark domestically, which it would only need another $125 million internationally, which it's already at, to break even. So that's the reason why I think this film is going to easily break even and is going to make a pretty decent amount of profit. The question, though, of course, is how much less does this film make versus the original? $1.3 billion is out of the cards. I would even say $1 billion is likely out of the cards as well. It's not impossible, right? I think the chances of this getting to $500 million by next weekend is likely. This film has no competition for the next month. So this film has no competition for the next month. It also is going to have some help from the Thanksgiving weekend coming up very soon. So you're going to have people off from school. A lot of people have traditions of going to the movies. I think this film probably will end up being a pretty good performer Thanksgiving-wise. So yeah, don't write this film off. If anyone's going to try and push narratives of this film not doing well and, being a failure of any kind, if we're talking strict financials, that's just not the case. Again, this movie not doing as well as they had expected it to do, which is a good thing. The film still is strong enough opening-wise to make its money back. And the reason why I say that is because if we go ahead and compare this film to some other films that came out this year and to the original Black Panther, all right? Wakanda Forever is at $180 million projected for this weekend. Put that up against Thor: Love and Thunder's $144, right? That film capped out around $745 million worldwide. However, it made $401.9 million internationally, right, in the international markets. I don't think Wakanda Forever is going to do that kind of money internationally. That's just my own personal thought. We might see that change. because the film, again, if you compare even just the original film, domestic 700 versus its $600 million international, that shows you that the film is a much better domestic performer than international. That, I think, is going to hold also true to this one. We saw it just also even with this opening weekend of 180 versus 150. So anyway, that 745, though, again, that is the number for us to probably keep our eye on. Comparing it to Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, it came in underneath Multiverse of Madness. Now, Multiverse of Madness had also historically the biggest drop in MCU history. So again, how close does that get to this movie, right? How much does this film drop, Wakanda Forever? In comparison to that one, does it also have a historic level drop? It very well might. It could. It's a possibility. But again, with no competition and with decent ratings from the audiences that are going to see it, it could maybe be able to hold that off. Doctor Strange had very, very mixed reactions. I would think Wakanda Forever is slightly more positive. However, again, we'll have to wait for those numbers to actually come in. Either way, I'll want to see what the numbers look like in comparison to Doctor Strange by the end of the second weekend, because remember, Doctor Strange had a massive drop domestically and internationally, and it ended up going around $952 million. Now, the movie should have made $1 billion. Based off of the first 2 weeks, it should have actually, $1 billion should have actually been well within its cards. But because the film had such bad word of mouth, it ended up, dropping so much. It still made massive profits, so let's not forget that part of it, but it did come in underneath those projections there. Now, where does this film compare against the first Black Panther film? The first Black Panther film was at $203 million domestically. So, yeah, you're seeing this film not going to get to the $700 million. No way is going to get to $700 million domestically. $500 million is much more likely just based on the differences there percentage-wise and also what the word of mouth is. This film just does not have as much positive word of mouth as the first one. And the 2.5-hour runtime, I do think, is going to end up being a detriment because you feel those 2.5 hours. And so just to give you a comparison of what we can expect to see from Wakanda Forever going forward. Black Adam, as I mentioned, probably going to be a box office flop at this point. There's just no real markets left for this film to be able to make the amount of money back that it needs to hit its break-even point. Ticket to Paradise has made its money back and is doing quite well. Again, actually doing over than historical standards. And so congratulations to George Clooney and Julia Roberts, you Hollywood elite snobs. Halal Crocodile, $72.6 million. Again, towards the higher end. It's starting to actually creep up towards the higher end of historical standards. But as I said, because internationally, it just wasn't really much of anything. It needs basically to rely almost entirely on a domestic revival. It's seeing that somewhat. Is it going to be able to hold up, though, through the next several weeks to push it to the break-even point? I don't personally see that happening. But again, who knows? Smile, $209.9 million. This film, as I said, because of its low budget, was able to make $100 million in net profit. Pray for the Devil, $21 million. No budget. Can't talk about it. Banshees of Inisherin. Also, same thing, $14.8 million worldwide, but can't say much about it. One Piece film, Red, $162.5 million. Likely profitable, but can't guarantee it because I don't have the numbers. Till, $8 million. Don't care. Halloween Ends, also already made its money back, but crappy movie. Let's go ahead and go into the box office charting because people love going into the charts. If you want to access this chart for yourself, you can go to ombreviews.com and go to the box office tracking. I'll try and update the chart that you'll see here. This is using Excel, whereas I like to put them first in Google Sheets because it's just easier in general. It works better. The Excel online doesn't autofill calculations and formulations and stuff. So I'll update that, though, as soon as I possibly can so that you can see that for yourself. But if you scroll down, you actually will see the chart I'm working with right now. The one difference is going to be that you won't be able to see how the numbers, the names don't stick. It's because when you publish it for some reason, it doesn't work. See, as you can see, I have it pinned here and it stays just fine. For some reason, though, when it's online, it doesn't work. If you know how to fix that, let me know in the comment section below or send me an email. Anyway, the $330 million of this film's opening, right, means right now it's at $177 million in the red. However, it's already at 1.3 times its budget. So that's actually a pretty good start worldwide and in comparison to its budget. So that's the reason why I said don't sleep on this movie. Whereas Black Adam at $352.2 million right now is still $88 million in the red. The film is going to be running out of space. It's probably going to top out maybe around $400 million or so, maybe getting a little bit more than that, meaning the film is going to end up being a box office loss and a box office failure. And again, I can't say that I'm all that surprised by that number. All the other numbers really haven't changed all that much. And so let's go ahead then and dive into those Black Panther, Wakanda Forever numbers a little bit more. So $330 million worldwide. Let's go ahead and do what we did for Black Adam and what we've done for a couple other films too. and compare this opening weekend to other films that have done similar opening weekend numbers. All right, so the first one that comes up is actually Love and Thunder. We already saw that, mentioned in the other charting at the numbers. But as you can see, this movie opened at $302 million, and then by the second weekend actually got to just around $500 million. So if this movie tracks worldwide at around the same rate, so let's say maybe it does a bit better domestically, but not as well internationally as Love and Thunder, that would show here, right? And so that week 2 number is going to be very interesting to look at. And that if it gets to the $500 million mark or goes past the $500 million mark, then we're looking at a range of the film getting around $700 million. Again, Thor: Love and Thunder ended around $745 million, which was just exactly in that range, right? The low end range I had for the Thor: Love and Thunder was $711 million. High-end range was $995. Clearly, it didn't get anywhere close to the high range because it didn't double the amount of money that it made. That would mean very incredible legs, which isn't very common for those types of movies. So the film ended up capping out around $745 million. And so you could probably expect something similar if we see similar matchups by week 2. And again, we'll dive into those numbers. Jurassic World Dominion, right? It did a little bit better, right? And $391 million. This film by weekend 2 at $624 million. So probably not going to get there. Black Panther saying Black Panther's not going to get there. And this film had to end up like crawling towards $1 billion just to get there. It didn't go towards the low end. It did just about the average. So again, that $1 billion range was very much within my projections. I didn't think it was going to happen because the drop-offs were pretty bad and the movie was pretty bad. But it was able to crawl over the finish line and be able to get to that number. People might bring up saying, Top Gun Maverick, it started off, a lot slower than that, but look at that second weekend. It saw historic level drops, right? Some of the lowest levels of drops in history. And then because of having such a great word of mouth, this film more than doubled, almost tripled the amount of money it made in the first 2 weeks. And so, this is one of those films where it's one of those rare times where a film does so well and has such positive word of mouth. Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, you can say with absolute certainty, not getting that kind of word of mouth at this point in time. Doctor Strange 2, this was the other film that I was comparing it to. Remember, Doctor Strange 2 did not make it to $1 billion, and this film probably should have, right? As you can see, the numbers for this movie were $450 million, and then by weekend 2, it was at $688. The minimum that this film should have made, had it actually done, normal numbers historically, was $982 million. It tapped out around $950. So this film actually did worse than what most films tend to do. So that's why it actually fell outside of the range that I had for it. That all being said, though, if the film is already, Black Panther's already well below this number, we can expect similar numbers there for the film to also be well below. And so again, Doctor Strange 2 probably not going to be in the cards for it. Really depends on the domestic versus international for Black Panther. And let's see any other films that get somewhat close. The Batman was at 248 by weekend 2, was at 465, tapped out around $769 million. So again, that's why I'm thinking this film, Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, if I had to guess right now based off of this, comparing it to all of those other films that I've mentioned, I'm thinking somewhere between $700 and $800 million by the end of its run. And I think a lot of it's going to depend, of course, on how strong the domestic numbers are. I think that it's going to be quite strong, stronger than people expect it to be. And then also how weak the international numbers are, which I suspect to be quite weak in comparison to a lot of others. Regardless of any of that, whether it's strong or weak, whether it's holding up to those other films or not, the fact still remains the movie is right now on pace with this type of opening to do well enough to make its money back. So again, anyone who might try to say otherwise is selling you something. The film needs to make $625 to break even. So if the film does indeed make it to the $700 to $800 million mark, that's looking still at around a $50 to $100 million profit, depending on how much higher and how much above that film it goes. Now, some might try to say, yeah, well, is that really worth the investment when they put $250 million in and they only get $50 to $100 million back? I understand that argument to a certain extent. The fact still remains is that when you're making your money back and you're making profit to boot, and that's not even counting all of those other things that can sometimes add to a movie's profitability, whether it be product placements or whether it be other types of revenue streams that films tend to have. Again, all of these things can sometimes, easily lead to the films making a lot more than just that. At the same time, there are also additional costs that are sometimes hidden as well. We never know exactly how much money they spend on marketing. We can always guess because most films tend to, again, spend around 1.5 times their budget on marketing costs. This film probably had about that amount of money, if not higher. But regardless of any of that, film likely going to make its money back. Still a terrible movie. Again, there's been bad movies before that have made its money, but I think right now, At this point, I will say I don't think $1 billion is in its future. I said that if all the films come out the rest of the year, this film and Avatar were the next two to make $1 billion, had the chance of making $1 billion. I think Wakanda Forever, does it have a chance? Depends on how over $500 million by next weekend it is and how strong it continues to hold domestically. As I said, the domestic to me is going to be kind of the make or break for the film in both a profitability standpoint, but also in a how much money does it make standpoint as well. And then the second thing would be to say, okay, not only, was it going to be and whether it's going to make $1 billion, but also how much actual profit is this film going to make, especially in comparison to some of the other MCU films to come out this year. Some people might be interested in that. So again, Black Adam, likely going to be a box office flop. When you look at those numbers, again, it wasn't even really close in comparison as far as the amount of money that it started off with. If we go to Thor, Love and Thunder, Love and Thunder made $75 million in net gains. So again, was profitable, but definitely not what Disney was probably hoping for. Jurassic World Dominion made $352 million in net profit. Nowhere close to that is going to be Black Panther. There's no way that film is going to be able to do as well as that. And then let's go to the other film from earlier this year, the $950 million making movie. Let me see if I can find it on my chart. Oh, come on. Where's my chart? Doctor Strange 2. So Doctor Strange 2 made $272 million in net gain profit. So that to me is, I think, going to be kind of the big number, is that I don't think it's going to get to the 953 that Doctor Strange 2 ended with. It's going to be more so how much actual profit does it make? Does it make half of this? Does it make a third of this? Either way, I think what we're seeing is, if you look at this and then you jump again, $272 million in net profit versus $75 million in net profit for an MCU film versus this movie, which I think might be a little bit higher than Thor: Love and Thunder, but maybe not. So we're looking and seeing the law of the diminishing returns, it seems, for the MCU. And so you got what? A film coming out next year in the Ant-Man film. I don't think that film's going to be a huge moneymaker. The other two films really haven't been major moneymakers either. How much did they spend on that movie? That's going to be very important to tell, because the other films, though they haven't made as much, cost a lot less too. So how does that play into it? And then after that, you have the Marvels. It's not looking good. All I'm saying, the future of the MCU is not looking all that bright. It's looking like the films are going to continue to lose audience members. And ultimately, by the end of it, if they continue to spend the amount of money that they are on these films, at some point, they are going to make massive financial losses and be very similar to where Warner Brothers has been for a long time. The difference is that Warner Brothers never really got to a very profitable place in the first place, never really got to a huge box office success. Yeah, their DCE films made some money, but in comparison to Marvel, it was nothing. And in the case of Black Adam, they're looking at a box office flop, and they've had several box office flops the last couple of years. Big question is going to be, does the MCU become that in the very near future? At this point, based off of the trends, it seems like that is a likely scenario. But what are your thoughts about Black Panther: Wakanda Forever? Do you think that the film is going to have a chance of getting into $1 billion? I think that's kind of out of the cards at this point. But do you, for some reason, think it's not going to make it to its 625 break even? I would love to hear your logic behind that. I just don't see how it doesn't based off of these numbers. I don't see this film dropping off nearly as much as what Doctor Strange 2 did. I'm not hearing similar, same levels of negativity basically. And also the big factor there is domestically, there's kind of a defensive mechanism that Black Panther has, because I think that this film is going to perform very well amongst the African American community, as we saw it did just, again, massive numbers domestically for the first film, and a lot of that was because of the African American community. I think the same thing's going to happen here as well, at the very least for any groups and organizations that will buy these tickets and will go see it as a community and as a group. Again, I think that that's probably going to happen. But what are your thoughts? Let me know in the comment section down below. If you like this video, smash the like button, slap the fire button, honestly, and smash the rumble button. You're all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and as always, God bless. And now for a huge special shout out to all of my November Patreon Subscribe Star and Locals members at the Keeper of the Bifrost level and above. Starting off with Patreon with Father Luca Illich. Thank you very much, Father. Garrett Searles, Jaime Irie Hymason, Joe Horn, Jonathan Carney, Laura, The Modern Major General Story, Orange Hat Reviews, who you can check out on YouTube at his channel, Orange Hat Reviews, Rosetta Allen, who also has a YouTube channel that you can check out at Eagle Writer, and Miss Martin Muses, who also has a YouTube channel, Miss Martin Muses, and of course the amazing Empress of the Universe, Tina B, who you can check out at her YouTube channel, Tina B, where she hosts the show with Stephanie B, one of my mods, and one of my Valkyrie, called Soup to Nuts. Check out Soup to Nuts, and it premieres pretty much every Friday. So again, shout out to all of my Patreon people, also to all my Subscribe Star people, starting off with Matt317. Check him out on Twitch at Matt317. The R, Fast Reaction, Mr. Roy, J-Rod, the Beer Guru, and ZK-Man. And ZK-Man you can check out over at xtheboundaries.co to follow him as he starts his podcast, and also for many of his musical musings as well. Check him out. Very, very talented guy. And then lastly, my locals peeps. We got Miss Minnesota Hockey Fan, How About a Hockey Player, UAB Mad Dog, Mike Jackson for the win, J.H. Schwalbach, Brett D90, and the amazing lawyer, Robert Barnes. Thank you all so very much for supporting me. And if you want your name shouted out at the end of every live stream and video, go ahead and check out the top link in the video description below where you get access to that. Also, you get access to special things like giveaways and also exclusive podcasts that I do with John the Flickpick Flickinger and other guests throughout the month of November and in the previous and the months to follow as well. And again, if any of that sounds interesting to you, especially the 4K giveaways, Steelbook giveaways, some of them that I have to give away this month are films like Starship Troopers on 4K Steelbook, Top Gun Maverick on 4K Steelbook, amongst many others. If that sounds interesting to you, check out the link and follow the instructions down below. Anyway, you guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless.